Do you know that family dinner that looks like a margarine commercial? The table full. My sister laughing at a silly joke from my brother. In-law. The smell of the roast in the air. All perfect. But perfection, honey, is just an angle matter. On my side of the table, the view was different. It was him. My nephew. And forget that image of a boy with device on his teeth. The weather had been generous. Even too much. There, laughing with the glass of wine in his hand, was a man. And he knew that. Each time our eyes crossed over the potato platter, there was an extra shine. A delay of a second that should not exist. Me, aunt. He, nephew. Simple. But that night, watered with a full-bodied Malbec and silent provocations, the lines began to get blurred. What no one at that table knew is that hours later, when only both of us and the echoes of the party remained, he would make me the most dangerous bet of my life. A simple bet, dictated with a naughty smile in the corner of my mouth, that I would not have the courage to kiss him. And I had to prove that he was roundly wrong. Are you curious to know where this will stop? So subscribe to the channel, because you won't want to lose the rest. The front door knocked gently, though the last remnant of family and normality. My sister and husband were gone, leaving a dense and heavy silence in the room. A silence that was only broken by the discreet dial of the ice in my glass, and the sound of our breath. Just the two of us, me and him, Leo. The house, once full of voices, now looked like a stage mounted only for our final scene. He got up and walked to Malbec's bottle over the sideboard, moving with a confidence that I had never noticed before. He raised the bottle, a silent question in his eyes. I just nodded, watching as he filled my cup and then yours. That wine, which was once just the accompaniment to dinner, now looked an accomplice, a catalyst for what was coming. I thought they would never leave, he said, with a corner smile, breaking the silence. His voice was more serious than I remembered, and echoed in the void of the room. Shiver my skin. I laughed, a slightly too tense sound, and took a generous sip of the wine. The liquid came down hot, lighting the courage that sobriety would never allow. I didn't know what to say, so I just looked at him. He sustained my gaze, and the air became even thicker, loaded with non-said words and dangerous possibilities. The aunt responsible inside me shouted for me to say goodnight and climb to my room, but the woman, the one he had looked all night, was curious. She wanted to stay. He sat on the opposite couch to mine, relaxed, but with his eyes fixed on me, sparkling with fun and predatory energy. He turned the glass of wine between his fingers, watching the red liquid dance against the crystal. Silence came back for a moment, but this time it was a silence of anticipation, such as calm before a storm. Boredom, he suddenly stated, as if it were an irrefutable fact. What do we do to cure the boredom of post-family post? He gave me a challenging look, an invitation open to a game that I already felt that I would have nothing to be boring. I shrugged, trying to look indifferent, but my heart was already beating a little faster. How about a game? He suggested, leaning forward, supporting his elbows on his knees. A classic. Truth or challenge. The proposal stopped in the air between us. It seemed so youthful, so harmless. A joke of teenagers we had played countless times in family meetings. But now, in that context, it sounded completely different. I hesitated for a moment, the reason telling me to refuse. But wine and curiosity formed a powerful pair. Also, what could badly happen? They were just questions and small tasks. Okay, I answered, with a firmness I didn't feel. But without stupid challenges. I start. Truth or challenge, Leo? A victorious smile spread through his face. The game had started. The game started lightly. Questions about his first kiss. A challenge for me to imitate my brother. In-law snoring. Laughter filled the room, breaking the initial tension and making me think that perhaps I had imagined all that mood. Maybe it was just a silly joke between aunt and nephew to spend time. As I was wrong. It was his turn. Okay, my turn. Aunt. Truth or challenge? The way he said aunt was different. It had a velvety, almost ironic tone. Truth, I said, feeling safe. He thought for a moment, a finger drumming on his chin, his gaze running my face as if reading my deepest secrets. What was the biggest age difference you ever had with someone who kissed? For less, of course. The question took me by surprise. It was not about travel or tamarinds. It was personal, intimate. I stopped by turning my memories. Boyfriends, Cinties, all my age, or older. The answer was simple. But for some reason I felt that she would change everything. None, I admitted low. I never kissed anyone younger than me. As soon as the words came out of my mouth, the air in the room changed completely. The laughs died. His gaze intensified, the fun being replaced by something more focused, more predatory. He leaned on a little further, and I knew I had just given him the perfect ammunition. He absorbed my confession with a silence that lasted an eternity. His eyes did not blink, and a slow, dangerous smile began to form on his lips. It was the smile of someone who has just found the key to a door that really wanted to open. He knew he had trapped me, and seemed to be savoring every second of that moment. Never? He repeated, his voice low, almost a whisper. No boy? No experience? The word boy sounded like a calculated provocation. He was referring to himself, and we both knew it. I just shook my head negatively, unable to formulate an answer. My heart hammered my ribs, a war drum announcing the inevitable. He leaned back on the couch, crossed his arms, and looked at me from top to bottom. It was not a disrespectful look, but a look of evaluation, as if measuring my courage, testing my limits without even moving. Then he let out the phrase that burned the air. I bet, he said calmly. I bet whatever you want, you don't have the courage. The bet was suspended between us, vibrating with an almost palpable tension. It was no longer a game of truth or challenge. It was a duel. Courage of what, Leo? I asked, although I already knew the answer. He smiled, the boldest smile I had ever seen. To break your rule, here, now, with me. The provocation was direct, brutal, and incredibly exciting. A whirlwind of thoughts exploded in my mind. It was a cacophony of voices, each shouting louder than the other. The first voice was that of the aunt, the voice of reason, of the family, of what was right. She showed me my sister's face, her confidence in me. She screamed on boundaries, about the role I should play, about the scandal it could cause. Then came the voice of logic. She reminded me that he was my nephew, the boy I saw growing up. She pointed to the age difference, the complications, the regret that would certainly come the next morning, along with the hangover. This voice was cold and calculating, trying to pull me back to the security of sanity, away from that cliff. But there was a third voice, one that I had been locked for a long time, the woman's voice. She was tired of always being responsible, the good, the predictable. She was intoxicated by the wine, yes, but she was also electrified by the provocation, the danger, the look of that man who saw beyond the ant. She whispered it was just a bet, just a kiss. No one needed to know. This internal battle lasted maybe 10 seconds, but it seemed like a lifetime. On the one hand, years of social conventions and family ties. On the other, a raw impetus, a desire to break his own rules just for one night, to prove to him, and perhaps myself, that I was more than it was. The woman's voice was winning. While the civil war happened within me, Leo just watched. He didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. His confidence was a silent weapon. He remained leaning, his arms crossed with that smug smile that was both annoying and irresistible. He knew he had put me exactly where he wanted to, on the tightrope between yes and no. My silence was my answer. Every second that passed without me refusing, without my laughing and sending him to stop the bullshit, it was a little victory for him. The air in the room seemed thin, hard to breathe. I could feel the blood throbbing in my temples, a frantic rhythm that accompanied the beat of my heart. I looked at the glass of wine in my hand, then to him. I saw in his eyes not the malice of a boy, but the certainty of a man who knows what he wants. And he wanted me. Not the aunt, but the woman he was challenging. At that moment, the decision was made. It was not a logical or rational choice. It was visceral. It was an impulse, a spark, that decided to set the whole forest burning. I got tired of the voice of reason. I lifted my chin, found his gaze, and gave a single and slow nod. A minimal gesture, but that sealed our pact. His smile widened, a glow of pure triumph in his eyes. He didn't seem surprised, just satisfied. He had bet, and I had just paid to see. The battle in my head ended. The woman won. But not here, I said, my voice coming out firmer than I expected. The living room, with its family photos in the shelves and the strong light of the lamp, seemed too exposed, too real. I needed a veil, a shadow, a place where the rules of the world outside did not apply so hard. It was an illusion, of course, but it was a necessary illusion. His gaze followed mine, which settled in the great window that gave to the garden. The heavy velvet curtains were closed, creating a small recess between the fabric and the glass. It was a space of no one, a limbo. Perfect. He seemed to understand immediately, without me having to say anything else. The complicity between us was scary. He got up first, reaching out to me. I hesitated for a moment before accepting. Her skin was hot, and the simple touch sent a shockwave through my arm. He pulled me softly up, and we walked the few steps to the window. Each step seemed amplified by the silence of the house, a deaf sound on the carpet that marked our journey toward the forbidden. He opened a crack in the curtain and sneaked into that small space. The velvet fabric enveloped us, drowning the sound and the light. The world of the living room has disappeared, and we are just both of us, wrapped in the darkness and smell of dust and perfume. We were centimeters from each other, close enough to feel the warmth emanating from our bodies. Behind the curtain, the world shrunk. The only sound was our breath, a little too fast. The only light was a pale fillet that entered the crack of the fabric, illuminating only contours and silhouettes. I couldn't see his expression clearly, and that was good. It made everything more impersonal, more focused on the sensations. He still held my hand, his fingers intertwined in mine, a firm but kind possession, the first deliberate touch after our pact. It was like connecting a switch. An electric current traveled my body, from my fingertips to the back of my neck, making each hair of my body erected. It was a physical, uncontrollable reaction, a betrayal of my body to my brain. His other hand moved slowly, and I held my breath. I expected him to touch my face, my waist, but instead, her fingers brushed my forearm, rising slowly, burning my skin through the thin fabric of my shirt. The gesture was slow, exploratory, and 1,000 times more intimate than a hasty touch. He was building tension, stretching us like a violin rope. I could feel the warmth of your breath near my face, with a slight aroma of wine. We remained like this for a long moment, just feeling proximity, the energy crackling in the small space between us. It was a silent promise of what was to come, a dangerous preface written with touches and breaths contained in the dim light. Time seemed to be distorted in that cocoon of velvet. Every second was stretched, dragged on, full of tension that was almost unbearable. My mind was blank. All thoughts about right and wrong evaporated, replaced by a keen awareness of every minimum detail of that moment. His warmth, the sound of his breathing, the pressure of his fingers in mine. He released my hand, and I felt a momentary loss, but then his hands went to my waist. They pulled me an inch to the closer until our bodies were almost touching. I could feel the beat of his heart, or maybe it was mine, echoing through both of us. I leaned back instinctively, a gesture of submission, invitation. He lowered his face toward mine. The movement was torturantly slow. I closed my eyes, not wanting to see, just feel. I felt his hot breath on my cheek, then on my chin as he seemed to memorize the outline of my face without touching me. It was delicious torture, a final provocation before fulfilling the bet. Those moments seemed eternity. I was suspended in time, waiting for contact. By sealing that challenge, my whole being was focused on one point, my lips. I ummed them instinctively, an anticipation that was pure agony and pure ecstasy. And then finally, after the longest seconds of my life, I felt the soft pressure of his lips against mine. The first contact was exactly as the bet asked, a peck. His lips were soft and hot, pressing mine with surprising firmness but without any invasion. It lasted 3 seconds, maybe 4. It was technical, accurate. It was enough for him to win the bet, enough for me to prove that he was wrong about my lack of courage. He moved minimally, just an inch, enough for our lips to separate, but not enough to break the spell. I opened my eyes. In the dim light, I could see the outline of his face, the shine in his eyes. He was smiling, a small, satisfied smile. "See?" he whispered, his voice a little hoarse. It wasn't that difficult. I should have walked away at that moment. The bet was paid, the challenge fulfilled. I had tasted my point. The sensible thing to do would be sliding out of behind the curtain, laughing and declaring the ending game. But I didn't move. My body seemed to have created roots in that place, attached by the adrenaline and the heat that still emanated from it. Instead of walking away, I just stared at him back. That peck had not been the end, and we both knew. It had been the beginning. He had not extinguished the flame of curiosity. On the contrary, he had thrown kerosene in it. his taste was still. On my lips, a taste of wine and danger. And I discovered, for my complete horror and fascination, that I wanted more. None of us said anything. We just looked at each other in that confined space, the air vibrating with what had just happened and, more importantly, what was about to happen. His smile disappeared, replaced by a more serious, more intense expression. He saw in my eyes that the game was not over. He saw the invitation. This time I started. I leaned forward and kissed him again, but it was not a peck. It was not to win any bet. It was a real kiss, hungry, curious, a kiss that said, the reason. As soon as our lips touched the second time, something broke. The fine line that separated the woman's aunt, the play of desire, was sprayed. He immediately answered, the initial surprise giving way to an enthusiasm that stole my breath. His hands climbed from my waist to my back, pulling me hard against him, eliminating any remaining space. The kiss deepened, becoming exploratory. In love, there was nothing more coach or contained. It was pure chaos and feeling. I let out a small sound, a sigh that was lost in his mouth. The script we had created, the bet and challenge, had been completely abandoned. We were improvising in unknown and dangerous territory. The kiss was no longer about proving a point. It was about exploring a mutual curiosity that had been fermenting the whole night, perhaps much longer. As our mouths waged a battle, our hands started a game of their own. It was a dangerous game of exploration and surrender. My hands, which were once inert at the side of their body, climbed and entangled their hair. It was soft, and I pulled lightly, an instinctive gesture that made him press his body even more, against mine. His hands, however, were bolder. One of them remained firm in my lower back, holding me in place, anchoring to that moment. The other started to wander. She slid down my back, tracing my pimple, climbed my neck and buried in my hair, mirroring my own gesture. His hand was big and hot, and held my back of my neck with possessiveness that made me shiver. The kiss became slower, deeper. He moved the hand that was on my neck and used it to guide my face, changing the angle of the kiss, taking the full control. Then he did something that paralyzed my brain. He took my two hands, which were in his hair, and slowly guided them behind my back, holding my wrists with one of his hands. I was immobilized, arrested against him, with my hands locked. It was a power game, a complete surrender. I couldn't walk away. I couldn't touch him, could only receive. The gesture made me incredibly vulnerable and, to my surprise, incredibly excited. The danger of the situation, silent domination, raised everything to a new level. With my arrested hands and my body glued to his, I was completely at his mercy. The kiss, which was already intense, became devouring. He took my immobility to explore every inch of my mouth, and I surrendered to the sensation. The logic was gone. The aunt had been exiled to a distant corner of my mind. His free hand returned to my waist, but this time, his fingers slid under my shirt, touching the warm skin on my back. The contact of your skin and mine was like a lightning, a shock that toured my whole body and made my legs weak. I leaned on him so as not to fall, completely lost at the moment. That's when it happened. As his lips descended from my chin to my neck, finding a sensitive point just below my ear, a sound escaped from my throat. It was not a sigh. It was a low and muffled moan, a sound of pure pleasure, totally involuntary and uncontrollable, a sound that did not belong to that silent house. The moment the sound came out, I froze. My eyes widened into the darkness. The sound seemed to echo in the small space behind the curtain, tall and clear as a fire alarm. He also stopped, his face still buried in my neck. We both held our breath, listening. The silence of the house answered us, but the damage was done. We had made noise, and in the stillness of the night, any sound was a risk. The silence that followed my moan was the most terrifying of all. We stayed real estate, two thieves caught in the act, just listening, waiting. The heart was beating wildly on my chest, a frantic panic drum. Every second it seemed an hour. Maybe, no one has heard. Maybe we were safe. Hope was a fragile flame in darkness. Then the flame went out. Tock, tock, tock. 3 dried beats at the living room door. The sound was so unexpected, so brutal, that I felt as if a bucket of cold water was thrown over me. The reality did not knock on the door. She broke into her. The spell was broken instantly. The heat of desire was replaced by a sharp cold of pure terror. "Aunt? Leo? Is everything okay there?" It was my sister's voice. My blood froze. Didn't she leave? Why did she come back? 1,000 questions exploded in my mind, all of them overlapping in a wave of panic. Leo moved away from me abruptly, dropping my hands. The space between us, once so hot, was now a cold abyss. Talk, talk, talk. "Guys, I forgot my bag. The door was unlocked. Can I come in?" Each word was a nail in our coffin. It wasn't a question. It was a warning. She was about to enter, and we were on the other side of the room, hidden behind a curtain, disheveled, and guilt on every poro of our skin. Panic was a physical wave. I felt the air miss in my lungs. I looked at Leo, and in the weak light leaked through the curtain, I saw the same terror mirrored in his eyes. That confident and predatory smile had completely disappeared, replaced by a mask of pure youth despair. At that moment, he was not the man who seduced me. He was the boy caught doing something wrong. My mind ran 1,000 kilometers per hour, trying to find a solution, a way out, anything. But it was like trying to hold back smoke. We were trapped. If we left from behind the curtain together, it would be obvious. If one left and the other stayed, it would be strange. The room door was in the direct view of the window. There was no escape. "Just a minute," I shouted, the voice coming out squeaky and trembling. A bad disguise. I tried to fix my hair with trembling hands, straighten my crumpled blouse. Leo ran, his hands over his face, trying to recompose the composure. We exchanged a desperate look, a look that said, "What do we do? What do we do now?" The door handle began to spin. It was the highest sound I had ever heard. The end. We didn't have a plan. We didn't have an excuse. In a second, the door would open. The light would turn on, and our secret and forbidden night would be exposed under the spotlight of a family betrayal. The time to think was over. The door opened. And what happened at that moment? The ragged excuse we tried to give, my sister's gaze trying to decipher the scene, and the conversation we had to have later. Well, it changes everything. It changes the dynamics of the family forever. Because once you cross a line like this, you can't go back. The bet was paid. The challenge was overcome. But the price we may have to pay for it is much higher than we imagined. That kiss behind the curtain was not an endpoint. It was the beginning of a complicated, dangerous secret that has the power to destroy everything. And the question that is in the air, the question that haunts me since that night is, was it worth it? What do you think? Do you think a moment of madness can compensate for the risk of losing everything? And most importantly, do you want to know what happened exactly when my sister lit the light and saw us? Want to know how this story goes on? If the answer is yes, you know what to do. Leave your comment below telling me what you would do in this situation. Subscribe to the channel and activates the bell, because part 2 of this story will depend on how much you want to hear it. And, believe me, the continuation is even more complicated than the beginning.